Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I tend to tell the stories of all these amazing entrepreneurs on my show that I've had on for the past year and a half I've had this show. But I never actually told my story. I've never really shared what my background was, why I do what I do, and what my mission in life is, and that is to help as many entrepreneurs speak as possible. I'm hoping for 100,000 entrepreneurs to be able to help them speak in my career. So let's start at the beginning. I was that kid. I started talking really early in life, and started those verbal skills really, really early. I think I was about a year and a half, year old, something like that, when I first started verbalizing and making sounds. So I've always been a talker, like ever since I was young. I was that chatty kid that would talk to anyone. I was really outgoing, just going a mile a minute, and I realized that was my ninja skill, was going out and just talking, sharing information. I loved sharing information. I loved sharing what I had learned. I loved that process of bringing multiple people together and allowing them to create something cool. Like for me, the perfect world is a conversation amongst entrepreneurs, because we're really good at this, just saying, hey, did you see so-and-so did this thing? Well, maybe we can do it this way. Hey, let's do this. Come together in a group and allow us to be able to just create these really awesome things. Okay. So you could probably say, since I was a kid, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always had that mindset that I just wanted to share stuff. Actually, really good, really interesting story behind that, which kind of also shows how it can go off the rails at times. I was a server. This was back around 99, 2000-ish. No, 2000, 2001-ish. And I was in a restaurant. And back in those days, we had a lot of credit card transactions, but most things were cash. Like a lot of people had cash on them. It wasn't like it is today, where everyone has a credit card and cash is rare. And as servers, we always had to make change for things. And I had run out of change, in the middle of the day. So I asked another server for some change of a 20. So I walk over to her, I give her the 20, and I proceed to tell her the entire story about this really awesome couple that I met. And they were doing these really cool things and all of this stuff. And they had just gotten done with this. And she stands there with her look on her face going, "Are you going to shut up?" That look, right? For me, it was sharing this really awesome story. But for others, it was a little bit problematic, it was just that sharing of information, that sharing of what I had in my head, and just allowing everything to come out. I think entrepreneurs, we've been there. We know what this is like, where other people just don't quite understand it. And for me, a lot of times, because of that, because other people didn't quite understand where I was coming from, I ended up not feeling like I was really heard, because a lot of the responses I would get were, "Oh God, he's coming again." He's going to start talking again, things like that. And I think that really gave me the early start on my purpose in life of helping other people to speak, and not just being able to get the words out. And that's part of what I do. It's how to put them in a way that people understand. And I think that's really the core of what I do. I'm more like your coach. I step in and say, "Hey, maybe we put this differently," or "This isn't going to read right," or, various things like that. But I help people to get all of that great information in your head and boil it down. So let's step forward a little bit. I moved back to Buffalo in 2006 from Cleveland, and which is where that story happened. And I had a great time in Cleveland. I've had more jobs than Liz Taylor's had husbands. I was a systems analyst for a publisher. My very first job when I first moved to Ohio was a junior programmer for a small med tech startup. I was GM of a club and restaurant for a while. Various things, usually customer facing. So like server, GM. The programmer jobs didn't do too well for me because I just wasn't. I love them, don't get me wrong, but I was a really good developer. But for me, it was more, I wanted to be around people, and I don't do well when I'm not around people, right? Very extroverted. So I moved back to Buffalo. This was about 2006. And at the time, I needed a job. In the past, the reason I had picked jobs up to that point, now I was in my late 20s at this point, reason I picked jobs was because it seemed really cool. I'd always wanted to be a server. So I'm like, yeah, let's go try this out. And it worked out really well for me. Side note, if there is one skill I would ever give somebody in saying you can take this anywhere, it's being a server. There's always jobs. It's pretty easy to find them, and the money can be pretty decent. So just throwing it out there if you're looking for a path for the immediate time being. My path was a little bit different, though, when I came back to Buffalo, because I decided I call centers all the time. I'm kind of curious how these things work. I want to go figure it out. I was always the guy that tried to figure out how things work, too. It's always my thing. So I go in and I apply for this job. It was for a major mortgage company at the time. And they're still a major mortgage company. And I get the job. And I start on this. And it was great. I got to talk to people all day. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It showed me a few things. It showed me how to be brief, because when you're on a phone call, you have a certain amount of time that you have to stick to. You can't really go over it. You can't be super chatty about things. They want to call in about their mortgage. They want the information they have right away. It gave me that training where to be personable, to talk to people, but not too much, and really showed me how to harness that energy that I had. But about 3 months into that job, I applied for a job as a trainer. I had been a TA in college, and so for me, that was something that just came naturally, and I loved doing it. And I ended up getting my application in 2 days late and still got the job. So I started into the training division of, the mortgage company. And it was a lot of fun. I realized I loved standing up in front of a bunch of people and talking. I loved going out there and spreading this information to people. And I found my dream job, training industry. As of this year, I've been in it about 20 years. So it's stuck with me. What was supposed to be my future previous employer, the job that I had early on, is now a long-term career. It's kind of funny how that happens. You just randomly come across something and eventually something sticks. As entrepreneurs, we go through that on a regular basis, where we end up trying to get things to work. We'll try this thing over here. We'll try this thing over there. We'll try all of these things, and none of them work. And then there's that one that works. Oftentimes it's random. So just like that in life works the same way. So I found out I was really, really good at explaining difficult concepts to people. I was great at taking all of this information, boiling it down, and putting it out so people can understand it. So I did that for 7 years, ended up moving up in the company. I was a global operations trainer for a bunch of large corporations at that point. And any new company that was onboarded, my boss and I were the first two people they would bring in to go through their current training and to see what's going on there, right? And to make it work and to deploy it to a large number of people. And I worked for a lot of large companies like Johnson & Johnson. We worked for Yellow Pages. We worked a bunch of larger corporations for it. And then 2013 happened. And in 2013, they restructured our business where they didn't need a corporate training team anymore. They outsourced it to the individual call centers, and I was out of a job. And I didn't know what to do at this point because I had this job for 7 years. I loved the job. So I went out and I went on the job hunt. I figured with the amount of information that I had, with the amount of experience that I had, I should be able to find a job pretty quickly, right? Theoretically. Well, 300 applications, 4 interviews, and not a single job. About 3 months later, I realized, nope, not going to work. This is not going to work. I had to come up with something different. So took a couple of temp jobs, completed a degree that I had been working on forever. So I figured, might as well do this now, get it finished. I moved in with my grandfather, who was ailing at the time. He was in his 90s and just needed somebody to be there full time with him. So I was able to help him through the last 6 years of his life, which I'm honored to do, and was a great situation for both of us. But it allowed me to be able to kind of step back and say, what am I going to try? Now, at the time, the nice part is because of this, I had a lot of, except for like incidental stuff like car payments and things, a lot of the big bills were handled. So I figured now, with the help of my family, because they had always known I was that entrepreneurial kid, like that had, they always knew I was going to be in business for myself. At some point, it was just where, like how that was going to manifest. So I figured this was the perfect time to do it. And so I did. I founded a company. And finished up a college degree. And in 2016, I founded my company called Nickel City Learning Solutions in the learning industry. Had a couple of big clients right away, which was great. Just started to build my network. There's one thing I've learned in business is your network is your net worth. I know we hear it over and over and over and over again, but I don't think people who are not in the entrepreneurial space truly and deeply understand exactly how important it is to have that tribe of entrepreneurs around you, to have that network. Came into a group on Slack, which was relatively new at the time, and they had a group of instructional designers. That was my title, and got a few really good jobs. So maybe 5 months after that, I decided I wanted to go in a slightly different direction because to me, real estate was the number one developer of wealth. Like if you were in this situation where you wanted, I don't care whether or not it was you were Democrat, Republican, whatever it is, whatever demographic you belong to, across the board, the common denominator, everyone that was wealthy had real estate. So I started to go to a bunch of real estate investor association meetings. And I'm going to one or two or three of these, and they're all just trying to sell me stuff. And I don't want to be pitch slapped when I go here. I wanted to learn. I wanted to start building that entrepreneur tribe, the actual tribe of people. Because at this point, remember, I own a job at this point. I'm a freelancer, but I own a job. I wanted that tribe. And I didn't find it. I spent probably 2 months trying to find a RIA. Then I stumbled across one because the way most things work, like I said before, is often it's random. Came across this RIA. Was at a hotel, like in their conference center. And I go in and it's packed. There's a bunch of people there. There's tables in the back. Very, very different vibe than what I had experienced earlier. So we get there, I start networking with people. Again, I will talk to anyone about anything. And so started to tell people about the business that I had just started, trying to tell them what I did, use that term instructional designer, which anyone outside the industry doesn't usually know what we do, but I still used it. I said, here's what we're doing. Here's what I got. Talking to this one guy, he says, you need to meet Chris. And so I'm like, sure, I'll chat. It's all good. So come to find out, Chris was the guy running this. He put us together, said, you guys need to meet each other. I introduced myself, said I was an instructional designer. What I later found out was Chris heard structural designer. He was flipping 3 houses. One of the foundations had gone bad, and he needed an engineer. Massive misunderstanding. Thankfully, that moment got me breakfast the next morning where I could explain exactly what I was doing, exactly what I did for a living. Now, having been in real estate and mortgages for a while, I had a specific type of information that he needed. Because at this point, he had a show that was piloting on HGTV at the time called Risky Builders. And he was going to build out a company called Flip Out Academy that was around that show. So that was the education arm of it. So not only would he have this show, he had done 240 flips to this point already, started multiple companies, and had the education side of the show too, so we could start teaching people how to do real estate. So we started off with a course on that, which led on to 2 courses, which led on to the show not being picked up, which led on to a massive pivot into the money world. And 8 years after that, I was with him in that entrepreneurial space. And it was an awesome thing because I could learn from an experienced entrepreneur. I saw everything. I saw what he did well. I saw what he didn't do well. He was able to mentor me and to show me how to get to where I needed to go. And in turn, what I ended up doing for him after Flip Out Academy wasn't doing well and we had to make the pivot after the ship, very first thing we did was a 90-minute presentation explaining specially designed and engineered whole life insurance policies, also called infinite banking. Very difficult concept. Most people don't get this right away. It takes a year at least for people to get this concept because it goes against everything you've been taught. You have a loan. but you don't have to pay it back. I borrow money, but it still gains interest. There's ways that this works without getting into too much detail, but there's so many things that don't make sense that most people, their brains call BS on it. So I can remember helping him as a coach get to the point where he could give all of these presentations, like give this one presentation. And we were he had a facility at the time, and we were in the facility at like 9:00 at night, rehearsing this thing over and over and over and over and over again. And I realized this took every part of what I was good at in one job. It mashed it all into one job. I love being in front of people. So put me on a stage, I'll talk all day long. Okay. Now I can help others to overcome those issues that I had when I was a kid, where it was just kind of, blender with its lid off, talking all over the place. Now I could help people to talk in one direction, something I had learned during the call center days. And I loved being able to help people to spread their awesome stuff. I still talk about client stories all the time going, do you see this really cool thing this person did? I have a client now who just got a Guinness World Record on mountain climbing. And I tell all the time about how everyone calls her Mountain Barbie, and there's a whole bunch of stories behind it. And I realized that I had found my calling in this world, and that was helping entrepreneurs to speak. So for 8 years, I helped him to do all of it, helped him with TED Talks, helped him with everything that he was doing, any presentation he did, and really found my groove. And ended up taking on other clients, ended up building it into a company, and now it's nice. I love doing what I do. I help entrepreneurs speak. I help people to be able to spread that wisdom that's inside their head so that they can share it and edify others. There is no better job that I can find that I can put my mark on this world and be able to say, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people. Because for every one person that I help with a talk, let's say there's 100 people in the audience, those 100 people now have had their mindset changed. They go out, they tell one person, now it's 200, and it keeps growing. So that is my background as a keynote architect. Is I loved helping people to be able to speak. I love that process of creation. Co-creation for me is great. Bring me on a team and we're just going to go do some really cool stuff. I love that process of helping people tell stories. I love hearing entrepreneur stories from, one client of mine who moved over with his mom and his brother from Mexico to the US illegally twice. He's now legal, and built a massive empire, to, a woman who lost herself in helping her husband grow a company and now is learning her own identity, to Guinness World Record holders who have done these amazing feats, to Chris, who started his first company at 16 and now has over 20 at this point, to all of these awesome stories that I get to share with people that will help others to be able to grow. And so really hope that the podcast brings that for you, because that's really my goal for this podcast, is to show you those stories of the people who are trying to, who are in business, and the story behind it. One of my favorite questions that I ask on the show is what was the series of events that brought you to blank? I love to hear that, because as entrepreneurs, one of the things that we need to hear more of is that we need to hear more about kind of how people started this, because again, that might be the catalyst for that one random act, or that one seemingly random act that you take that then takes off, that then starts your career, that then helps you to get traction. And hopefully with the show, we do that. So thank you so much for joining me today on this, on my very first solo podcast. You're going to have a few more of these too, because what I want to do over the next little while is to share with you a few of the stories and underlying things that I have learned over, at this point, it's over 130 episodes that I've recorded so far. Some of the stuff that I've learned, some of the stuff that I've taken away from it, and I want to be able to share that with you. So hopefully you guys are having a great rest of the day, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode.